opportunities come in the products that we make, the way we market them, and with our relationships with customers, employees, and suppliers, and the community at large. Each of these needs to be considered not just from the narrow standpoint of an exchange, but from the wider standpoint of a gift funded by an exchange. This enlightened way of viewing businesses allows the Pope to imagine new forms of enterprise. Quote, alongside profit-oriented private enterprise and the various types of public enterprise, there must be room for commercial enterprises based on mutualist principles and pursuing social ends to take root and express themselves. It is from their reciprocal encounter in the marketplace that we may expect hybrid forms of commercial behavior to observe, and hence an attentiveness to ways of civilizing the economy. Charity and truth, in this case, requires that shape and structure be given to those types of economic initiative which, without rejecting profit, aim at a higher goal than the mere logic of exchange of equivalence or of profit as an end in itself. Okay, now once again, we have to ask ourselves if Benedict is merely fantasizing about these new forms of enterprise. This is an important question to ask because the world is full of economic and business nostrums that sound noble, but which turn out to be impractical at best or destructive at worst. Indeed, all economic theories look good on paper. Why else would anybody write them down? But they function very poorly when one attempts to put them into practice. But there is an absolute test to determine whether a thing will actually work. And that is to ask if it is actually working. Are there examples on the ground and functioning that we may look at and examine? If a theory has no actual practice, we are permitted to think that it might not be a good theory. So, does the Pope's principle of gratuitousness pass this test? In fact, it does. There are many large and long-standing examples that we may examine. Many examples could be advanced, but some of the more prominent ones include the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation of Spain, the cooperative economy of Emilia-Romagna in Italy, the Grameen Bank, which pioneered microlending, employee stock ownership firms, and cooperatives and mutual banks and insurance companies of every size and description. Let me say just a few words about some of these. The Mondragon cooperatives were founded 50 years ago in the Basque country of Spain, a region that had been devastated by the Spanish Civil War. The founders were inspired by the works of their parish priest, Don Jose Maria Arizmendi Arrieta. Today, it is a collection of 250 cooperatives and one of the largest corporations in Spain. It has over 100,000 worker owners doing more than $24 billion in sales. But Mondragon is not just a business. It operates schools, research institutes, a university, training institutes, a social welfare system, and a credit union, all of which are self-funded. Such a huge enterprise requires no outside investment, but only the commitment and dedication of its own workers and its community. In Emilia-Romagna, the area in Italy around Bologna, 40% of the GDP comes from worker cooperatives. Wages are about twice the average for Italy, and the standard of living is among the highest in Europe. Moreover, they have pioneered a new process of industrial production which involves networking among small firms to cooperate on large projects, a feature which allows them to maintain small and medium-sized companies, but to compete internationally on big jobs. The Grameen Bank, which began in the impoverished countryside of Bangladesh, makes very small loans to very poor people. With these loans, typically in the range of $50 to $200, the poor are able to become independent business owners and support their families. What is especially instructive about Grameen is just how little capital it takes to unleash the creative power of the poor. A power that history and economics has largely ignored. But we need not look to such exotic forms of organization to see the principle of gratuitousness in action. In this country, we have many examples of employee-owned enterprises. One prominent firm is the Springfield Remanufacturing Corporation, which was founded in 1983 when a group of employees bought out a failing unit of International Harvester. Its president, Jack Stack, set out to create a corporate culture of employee ownership and involvement. This involved not merely distributing shares of the company to the workers, but of creating an environment of open book management and continuous education, which Jack Stack calls the great game of business. Stack is seeking not just to grow his company, but to grow the employees as well. And he claims that his informal system of education produces employees who are the equivalent of MBAs from the best schools. Another interesting example is that of the Real Precision Manufacturing Company, which set out to pay a just wage, which the economists say is either impossible or bad for business. RPM established a target wage for its lowest employees based on a rough idea of the reasonable standard of living in their area. In 1996, this target wage was $10.91 an hour, or about $22,500 a year. However, RPM could not simply raise the minimum wage to this amount. To do so would simply put the entire company at risk, making everybody worse off. Instead, Real designed its manufacturing work to include more skill and decision-making from employees, thus creating conditions which require less supervision, allow faster setup times, and reduce the need for quality inspection. Together, these improvements lowered their costs so that they were able to pay the just wage. At the same time, they improved their competitive position. Here we see an example of the application of the moral imagination to business problems and how it is capable of producing both a stronger moral and business climate. I could give many other examples, but it should be clear by now that Benedict is not presenting us with a mere set of platitudes or an unobtainable ideal, but rather he is pointing to existing and successful business practices, practices which we, as the Catholic laity, need to examine and to incorporate in our own business lives.